Africa was exploited because of the racism that was inherent in the colonial system and politics. And that perpetuates itself again in Israel. What we are also advocating for is justice, because a lot of times the Israelis and the Zionists and their supporters get away with impunity. They're never held to account for their atrocities. We saw the attacks on elderly people within Aqsa yesterday, today. Those settlers don't ever get punished or charged or arrested, but instead the victims get abused, arrested, pushed in against the wall, like we saw in today's videos.
Yalla. The best way of expressing humanity is solidarity with the oppressed wherever they are. In the case of the tragedy of the Palestinian people under the colonial apartheid Israeli regime, South Africa always has its saying at the public and official levels. Hundreds of activists responded to the call by Palestine Solidarity Alliance to organize the Walk of Freedom in support of the Palestinian people to live free of the Israeli colonial settler apartheid racist regime. To talk more about that, I have with me from South Africa the coordinator of Palestine Solidarity Alliance, Mr. Nazim Adam. Welcome to our program, Mr. Nazim.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good to be with you, Osama, and to be with Palestine TV.
You're welcome. We know that South Africa has gone through the experience of apartheid and the people there suffered much. And now South Africa feels the tragedy, the suffering of the Palestinian people under this racist apartheid Israeli regime, which kills every day, demolishes houses, closes the roads, builds settlements, and so on. And 2 days ago, you organized the Walk of Freedom in support of the Palestinians to get free of this apartheid regime. Tell us about that activity, Mr. Nazim.
So I'll share a little bit about the activity, but also about the Palestine Solidarity Alliance. So for the past 13 years, we've held a Walk for Freedom in the month of September, which is South Africa, also commemorates South African Heritage Day, to celebrate our rich diversity as a country, but also overcoming apartheid. And we recognize, in the words of Nelson Mandela, that South Africa cannot be free until Palestine is free. So about 13 years ago, we started the first Walk for Freedom in the local community, largely with sympathetic supporters of the Palestinian cause. But over the years, it's grown, and we've been holding the Walk for Freedom in a number of major cities and towns across South Africa on an annual basis. COVID did impact on us, but Walk for Freedom continued this year, and we had over 1,500, maybe 2,000 people participate in this momentous event to basically show their support for the people of Palestine and voice their objection to kind of ongoing ethnic cleansing that we see happening across Palestine, Masafariata, and then recently we've been seeing the attack on the colonial settlers assaulting and intimidating Palestinians within the sanctity of Masjid al-Aqsa and Jerusalem. And we recognize that we need to continue our struggle as solidarity activists in South Africa for the cause of a free Palestine, for justice and for equality.
Yes, Nazim, we know that the public opinion, not only in South Africa, but in many countries around the world, is in support of the Palestinian people, in support of justice, and in support of human rights. But when it comes to the governments and the official position, the official opinion, it's still to a certain extent on the side of Israel. So what weight, what value you give to these public activities by the pro-justice people?
So I think that South Africa, we had great hope South Africa would lead the kind of international diplomatic struggle for the liberation of Palestine. And to be honest, they have done a lot more than most countries, but we do find that they stop short in diplomatic terms of full sanctions against the Israeli state, as was done by many countries against South Africa for its apartheid policies. So recently, our Minister of Foreign Affairs spoke out at the United Nations. We understand that they work in diplomatic terms, but there are some positive strides on their side, and one of that is the um, initiation of reopening the UN Special Commission against apartheid. This will be a significant move if we are able to do that at the United Nations, and therefore hold Israel accountable for its racist apartheid policies and ethnic cleansing and settler colonialism. So there are and there's also some disappointment, because we as activists on the ground, we need to keep agitating more for the complete isolation. Israel must be rendered as a pariah state, just as apartheid South Africa was rendered a pariah state, and then isolated, and apartheid was dismantled, and a transition to democratic government.
Yeah.
So it's not easy, because we see a lot of governments under the yoke of American imperialism, including African states under uh, the the yoke of Western idealism, just undermining all efforts for justice. So the South African government and a few Southern African states have spoken out, and we applaud that, but we demand.
Yes, and Mr. Nazim, the Israeli occupation government officials are bragging about some countries normalizing relations with this apartheid state despite all the oppressive measures that it's committing against the Palestinians on a daily basis. So, how would such a trend or such approach by these governments affect the momentum of the activists who support the freedom for the people of Palestine?
The truth is, many of these governments that are supporting and normalizing relations with Israel, um, they don't necessarily have the support of the people. So there's general opposition to it, and they're not really representative of their own people. Many of them are regimes, and therefore they by normalizing the term that they use to describe relations with Israel, they actually then just admitting that they are part of the oppression, not just of Palestinian people, but their own people, because they are not listening to the voices of their own people. So many of these governments need, I mean, it's going to impact on them, because people that are oppressed, silenced, and marginalized and not listened to will eventually rise up. And these regimes have painted themselves, I think, into a corner, and eventually they will have to realize that they cannot align themselves with the kind of atrocities that we see daily, the attack on people, the destruction of villages, the closure of water wells, every kind of human violation, bombing of innocent civilians. By normalizing, you're not just supporting Israel, you are becoming part of the oppression,
Yes,
and people will rise up to that.
yes. And my final question to you, Mr. Nazim, we know that the African continent suffered much the repercussions and the impact of the Western colonial powers decades ago, and it is still paying the price in terms of its resources, its development, and the other aspects of life. And Israel supported the colonial powers, supported the apartheid system in South Africa. Now Israel is trying to penetrate the African continent using diplomacy as a cover for its colonial enterprise. So your activities and your political activities, solidarity activities like the Walk of Freedom that we witnessed 2 days ago, how would this raise awareness in the African continent to stand firm against normalizing with Israel or allowing it to back, but like they say, in the gloves of a lamb, a wolf in the gloves of a lamb?
Yeah. So I think that we need to firstly understand that not all people support our cause. As we know that there are many people still in South Africa who benefited and supported apartheid in our own country, and therefore have this kind of natural allegiance with the Israeli state as a settler colonial state, because it resembles their own experience as white colonial settlers here. But even in Africa generally, I think what Israel has realized is there are many regimes illegitimate that need their support because they too are illegitimate to maintain their power and their control over their own people. So they are making these diplomatic inroads in Africa. What we try to do through the Walk for Freedom, our educational programs in schools, our lobbying with government, with trade unions, with organizations throughout South Africa, is to create an awareness and and keep within the conscious of our people the reality of apartheid. Because after 30 years, even young people in our schools haven't been taught about the reality and haven't experienced the reality of apartheid, and they have not knowledge even about our own experiences under a racist settler colonial state. So it is a work of human rights activists, and we were fortunate that at our walk we had a number of young people who are human rights activists for different causes, from the Amnesty International youth in our country to a group of young girls who fight for menstrual rights. All of these are important interconnected struggles in the struggle for human dignity and human rights. So for us, it's more about creating a consciousness of young people to stand firmly for truth and for justice, and to understand the politics and the suffering and the indignity that people experience because of privilege given to white colonial settlers, whether here in South Africa or in Palestine. Because essentially it is about that. Africa was exploited because of the racism that was inherent in the colonial system and politics. And that perpetuates itself again in Israel. What we are also advocating for is justice, because a lot of times the Israelis and the Zionists and their supporters get away with impunity. They never held to account for their atrocities. We saw the attacks on elderly people within Aqsa yesterday, today.
Yeah.
Those settlers don't ever get punished or charged or arrested, but instead the victims get abused, arrested, pushed in against the wall, like we saw in today's videos, bodies searched, pushed to the ground, beaten up. And these are the victims who have lived in Palestine and in Jerusalem for centuries in their families. And we need to continuously keep in the consciousness of all people that Palestine belongs to the Palestinian people, and that the Palestinian people who are in exile will be returned from the refugee camps to their homes. And we will never give up the struggle. And as South Africans, we will give our solidarity to the Palestinian people in whatever form is needed. As PSA, the Palestine Solidarity Alliance, that is our primary task, is to keep Palestine in the consciousness of our community in South Africa, to lobby, to promote boycotts, divestments, and sanctions, all peaceful means, as was done with the anti-apartheid movement across the globe in support of South Africans. We appreciated greatly news when it came from overseas during our heightened struggle in the 1980s, when we were running street battles with police and soldiers in the township. When people stood up and supported us, when people boycotted South African product, it gave us great encouragement and hope. And we hope that this Walk for Freedom also gives great encouragement and hope to Palestinian people that you are not alone, and we will continue struggling until Palestine is free from the river sea.
Coordinator of the PSA, Nazim Adam from South Africa. It has been great pleasure having you on our program. Thank you very much. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching. And from me, Osama Nazal. Have a nice time.